Our focus today on eNCA is on leadership, or perhaps to be more correct, a lack of leadership, really. Is South Africa facing a crisis in various sectors of society? Who is leading? Are we being led? Well, we've all seen how municipalities are collapsing, thus impacting service delivery, and how leaders have been accused of siphoning funds that's meant to improve all of our lives to other places. I'm joined by Dr. Harlan Cloete, a research fellow at the Department of Public Administration and Management at the University of the Free State, or UFS if you prefer. Dr. Cloete, good morning to you. I appreciate your time this morning. So is it a crisis, or is it just because we're focusing on it, or is it as bad as it's being presented?
Well, good morning, Gareth, and good morning to the viewers. No, I would say, the evidence abounds. We have a crisis in leadership in this country. If you look at all sectors of society, your focus was this morning is on local government. From local government to civil society, we have a crisis of leadership in our society, correct?
So where does this start, though? I'm going to use the turn of phrase that Dan Moyane used yesterday. Doctor, tell me if you agree that the rot of the fish starts at the head. Is that something you would agree with?
No, the tone is set at the top. And if you look at the context of our society, a friend of mine, I participated in a discussion the other day, reflections on freedom, 27 April, and one of the participants, Professor Philip Spies, shared, he says, what he sees in society is a lack of a social conscience, as that people don't care. We are given our extreme levels of inequality, poverty, that has also been identified in the National Development Plan, which, by the way, we don't seem to be talking about anymore. And the National Development Plan clearly spelled out, the 9 challenges of South Africa. Number 1 being poverty, unemployment, inequality. But there's consensus, that to get us out of this requires leadership, and more specifically, servant leadership. Leadership that is not married to title or to rank as it is, but leadership, that comes from a deep place of understanding that we come from such a divided past, and all our efforts should be about making sure that everybody is included, that we leave nobody behind, and that seems to be lacking. We've got a lot of egotistical leaders where people think that leader means that I have a title that makes me a leader. And leadership has got to do with behavior. It's about team. It's also not about this one man or one woman person who has got all the answers. It's rather, I think, the ability of a person to encourage others to follow along a particular course to determine a predetermined outcome. And so given the problems of our society, we have not seen enough. We don't seem to have the political will even to lead. And so leadership is a combination of things, but most of all, it is courage and that strong conviction to work towards the betterment of society.
I want to ask you this question as well, Doctor. I see a tweet coming through to us on @eNCA, by the way. I was looking out for it now to see if someone was reacting to our conversation. Pilani Thompson asking if it's not easier and more accountable for us not to have leaders in power for such a long period of time. If they were voted out every year and were changed every year, would they not do a better job? I don't know if it's a question you'd like to perhaps have a crack at.
I think our democratic system, our democratic system calls for participatory democracy and representative democracy. And so the citizens have an opportunity every 5 years, to elect leadership of their choice. But, leadership is also not, leadership means that you right where you are. You don't need a title to lead. You become a leader the day you decide to take responsibility, either to clean your street or to start an initiative in your community. But it's a collective. It's not this one man, one woman show. And so I think the mistake that we make in our country is that we expect sometimes, I think, too much of our elected representatives. And we sit back and we think, you must now deliver services to me, and I now do nothing. I don't have a responsibility. And so really leadership in our South African context, it's about co-creation, it's about ownership, it's about taking responsibility, about saying, that collectively we work towards the advancement of society.
Do you get the sense, though, Doctor? I don't think many people would disagree with the vision of that, though, but I think South Africans could feel abused in a certain way. There's a lot of taxpayers' money that goes missing. We're voting in various mayors. We've got another one coming up today in Johannesburg. Heavens knows how long that's going to last as well. I don't think we trust the government structures in place anymore. So I feel perhaps South Africans could feel uninspired to want to jump up and do the job that they feel they're paying a lot of taxpayers' money to someone else to be doing it. It's almost an apathy I get the sense of.
No, definitely, for sure. I think after almost 30 years of democracy, South Africans have a very clear understanding what leadership looks like. It's not speeches. It's not standing up on a podium and making grand speeches. It's not confined to a race. South Africans understand that leadership is behavior. Leadership is casting the vision and having the courage to act on that. Leadership is about urgency. And so South Africans have, collectively, we are disappointed at the type of leadership that we are seeing in South Africa, specifically from our elected officials. If you look at what is happening in municipality, for example, in coalitions, South Africans rightly feel that these coalitions are not acting in their interest, in their best interest. It's about what the politicians can get out of it in terms of positions, and it is not about empowering. It's about selfish, egotistical gains and egos. That defines, in a big sense, what we've seen in coalitions this far. There's not that collective sense of politicians who say, we are not enemies. Let's see how we can work together in the interests of South Africans. And so South Africans rightly feel let down by what they've observed, specifically at local government and also at the national level.
Doctor, let me ask you this in closing briefly, if at all possible. Next year, and I've spoken about this a couple of times today with the coalitions and the new election of a Johannesburg mayor. Not far to go from next year's elections, arguably May, June, July. We haven't got a date as yet, unless I've missed it, for the elections next year. How do we decide as a country on leadership next year? Knowing everything you just mentioned, couldn't agree more. Coalitions, confusion, the chopping and changing. How do we try and choose leadership next year, just as I say goodbye to you?
I think leadership is, in this case, the political parties, they attract almost in political parties. And for me, the political party that can say, how do we address unemployment, education, equal access to education and health care? Those, for me, are the most fundamental principles, judging political parties, equal access. And so the policy choices, the policy positions being put forward by this collective, because we don't have a system where we elect an individual. You will have to vote for the party, which is unfortunate, because in some of these parties, you have strong leaders, you have weaker leaders. But it's going to be a difficult choice, because we do not have an electoral system that puts candidates forward. It's more the party says jump, you say how high.
I was about to say, it's how many people can jump all at the same time and jump at the same height as everybody else. That seems to be the issue we're in at the moment. Dr. Harlan Cloete, a lovely way of giving us an analogy on that, isn't it? A research fellow at the Department of Public Administration and Management at UFS, University of the Free State.